Imagine living every day feeling invisible, always standing in the shadow of someone you love the most. What happens when jealousy turns into something dangerous? Welcome to a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you want more gripping tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And for those who want to support us even more and unlock exclusive content, join the Zahra Premium membership today. Your support means the world. Lagos was alive that evening, cars moving like restless ants, voices blending into a sea of conversations, and somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Ada sat by the window of her small room, staring down at the street below. Her face was still, but her hands wouldn't stop twisting the hem of her dress. She had been like that for hours, lost in her own mind, yet alert to every sound coming from the house. Her mother, Mama Ifema, was in the kitchen. Ada could hear the clatter of plates, the gentle hum of a song she had been singing since Ada was a child. That song used to make Ada smile, but lately it only reminded her of something she couldn't bear: how easily everyone loved Mama Ifema. Neighbors dropped by just to greet her. Men at the market gave her extra pieces of meat for free. Even Ada's own friends seemed to adore her mother more than they adored her. From the street below, a boy selling roasted corn shouted his price. The smell floated up, mixing with the scent of fried plantain from their kitchen. Ada's stomach growled, but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the little glass bottle sitting on her table. She had bought it weeks ago from a woman at Balagan Market who swore it would solve any problem without a trace. Ada had not touched it since that day, but tonight her mind was restless, and the thought kept circling: what if she used it? Mama Ifema's laughter floated through the hallway, light and full. Ada clenched her jaw. She thought about last Sunday, when Mema had worn that bright blue dress and everyone at church kept saying how beautiful she looked. Even the pastor had called her up to pray for her in front of the whole congregation. Ada had stood there, smiling faintly, but inside, she was burning. She didn't understand why she couldn't have that same light around her. The front door creaked open. Her younger cousin, Chika, ran in with a bag of vegetables. Mema Ifema welcomed her warmly, thanking her for helping with the shopping. Ada watched from the window, seeing how quickly the warmth of her mother's presence wrapped around the girl. Chika giggled, showing off a small gift someone at the market had given her just because she mentioned Mama's name. Ada's hand drifted toward the little glass bottle. Her fingers curled around it, feeling its coldness. She didn't open it yet. Not tonight. She simply placed it in her pocket and walked toward the kitchen, her mind quiet on the outside but full of noise on the inside. The sound of the frying pan, the smell of spices, the gentle rhythm of Mama's humming, it all felt heavier now. She stepped into the doorway. Mema looked up and smiled, her eyes crinkling in that familiar way. Ada forced a smile back, but deep inside, something sharp was beginning to take root, and it wasn't going away. That night, rain tapped softly on the roof, a slow and steady sound that seemed to carry the weight of every unspoken word in the house. Ada lay on her bed in the dark, staring at the faint shadow of the ceiling fan turning lazily. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the way her mother had smiled earlier, the way Chika had leaned into her as if they shared some special bond Ada would never have. The house was quiet now except for the faint clinking of plates in the kitchen. Mama Ifema was still awake, cleaning up after dinner as she always did, humming under her breath like there was nothing in the world to trouble her. Ada turned on her side and faced the wall. She had told herself she wouldn't think about it tonight, that she'd sleep and let it go. But sleep was far away, and the thought of that small glass bottle in her drawer felt heavier than the rain outside. Earlier in the day, she had seen her mother at the market, talking and laughing with a man who owned a pepper stall. Ada had been standing just a few steps away, waiting for her turn to buy tomatoes, but the man hadn't even glanced at her. His eyes had been on Mema the whole time, his voice warmer than it had been with anyone else. And when Mema had introduced Ada, he had smiled politely, but it was that same detached smile people gave to strangers they wouldn't remember. The memory made Ada's chest tighten. She sat up slowly, her feet touching the cold floor. The sound of the rain seemed louder now. She walked to her drawer, opened it, and pulled out the bottle. It was small, no bigger than her palm, the liquid inside faintly cloudy. The woman who had sold it to her at Balagan Market had said only a drop would be enough to make anyone sleep forever. Ada had laughed it off at the time, pretending she was buying it for some silly prank, but she hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. A sudden clap of thunder shook the house, and Ada nearly dropped the bottle. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She told herself she was only holding it. She wasn't going to use it tonight. Not yet. She just wanted to feel its weight, to remind herself that she had the choice. In the kitchen, the sound of running water stopped. Footsteps moved toward the living room. Mama was done cleaning. Ada quickly slipped the bottle into the pocket of her nightdress and stepped out of her room. She found her mother sitting on the couch, drying her hands with a small towel. The TV was on, showing a late-night news broadcast. The glow from the screen cast a soft light on Mama's face, making her look almost younger, like the years had been kind to her. "Why are you still awake?" Mama asked, her tone gentle, not accusing. Ada shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." Mama patted the seat next to her. "Come. Sit with me." Ada sat down, careful to keep the bottle hidden in her pocket. For a while, they watched the news in silence. Mama reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Ada's ear. The simple gesture made something twist inside Ada, something that felt like love tangled with resentment. "You've been quiet these days," Mama said softly. Ada looked away. "Just tired." Mama didn't press. She simply took her daughter's hand and held it. Her touch was warm, steady, the kind of touch that made you want to hold on forever. But Ada's mind wouldn't let her rest in that moment. It kept whispering about how everyone loved this woman, how nothing Ada did ever seemed to shine in the same way. The rain began to slow outside, turning into a faint drizzle. Mama got up to make tea, saying it would help them both sleep. Ada followed her to the kitchen, watching as she moved with practiced ease, boiling water, opening the tin of tea leaves, reaching for the sugar. Every movement was effortless, graceful, almost like a dance. Ada's eyes flicked to the steaming kettle, then to the 2 cups on the counter. Her heart began to pound. She could do it now, just a single drop. Mama wouldn't notice. No one would. But her fingers stayed frozen at her side. She told herself it wasn't the right time. She told herself she was only thinking. Mama handed her a cup. "Drink before it gets cold." Ada forced a smile and took it. The tea was sweet, the warmth sliding down her throat in slow waves. She sat at the table while Mama sipped hers, both of them saying nothing, the air heavy with the unspoken. When they were done, Mama kissed Ada's forehead and told her to sleep well. Ada returned to her room, the bottle still hidden in her pocket. She placed it back in the drawer but left it slightly open this time, as if keeping it closer made the thought easier to reach. She lay back down, listening to the last drops of rain against the roof. Her eyes stayed open long into the night, the image of her mother's smile replaying over and over until it no longer felt like comfort, it felt like a challenge. Morning light crept into the room, slow and reluctant, falling across Ada's face. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, sometimes smiling, sometimes turning away. She pushed the blanket aside and sat up, her mind still heavy with the same thoughts that had chased her through the night. From the kitchen came the clink of plates and the soft scrape of a chair against the floor. Mema Ifema was already awake, preparing breakfast. The smell of fried eggs and bread filled the air. Ada stayed in her room a moment longer, staring at the bottle in her drawer. She didn't touch it this time. She just looked at it, like someone looking at a door they weren't ready to open. She finally stepped out and found Mema humming while slicing tomatoes. Sunlight streamed in through the small window, catching on the thin gold chain around her neck. It was the same chain Mema had worn for years, the one Ada had once admired as a child. Back then, she used to imagine her mother passing it down to her one day. But these days, Ada doubted that day would ever come. "Good morning," Mema said with a smile. Ada nodded, pulling out a chair. "Morning." They ate together quietly. Chica joined them halfway through, still in her nightdress, chattering about a dream she had. Mema laughed at every silly detail, reaching over to smooth Chica's hair. Ada sipped her tea without saying much, watching the way Mema's attention seemed to wrap around the girl so easily. After breakfast, Mema announced she was going to visit a neighbor who had just returned from the hospital. She asked Ada if she wanted to come, but Ada shook her head. "I have things to do at home." Mema didn't question her. She simply gathered a basket of fruits and left with Chica. The house fell into a quiet stillness, broken only by the distant sound of traffic from the street. Ada stood at the window for a long while, watching the two of them disappear down the road. She wandered back into the kitchen. Her eyes fell on the 2 cups they had used for tea, still on the table. The kettle was still warm. She reached for the bottle in her pocket, not because she planned to use it now, but because she wanted to feel the possibility again. She held it up to the light, watching the way the liquid shifted inside. A knock on the door startled her. She quickly hid the bottle under a folded kitchen towel before opening the door. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, carrying a bowl of jollof rice. She smiled warmly and said Mema had asked her to bring it over for Ada to have lunch. As Ada thanked her, the thought slid into her mind: everybody was always doing things for Mema. Even when Mema wasn't around, people treated Ada as an extension of her, not as Ada herself. She closed the door and set the rice down on the table. Hours passed. Ada sat in the living room, pretending to read a magazine, but her thoughts kept drifting. She imagined what life would be like without Mema in it. She told herself it would be quieter, simpler. People would have no choice but to see her, not her mother's shadow. When Mema and Chica returned, the house seemed to come alive again. Mema was carrying a small plastic bag of plantain chips, a gift from the neighbor she had visited. She handed some to Chica, then turned to offer Ada a few. "I'm not hungry," Ada said, her voice sharper than she intended. Mema looked at her for a moment, her smile fading just slightly, but she didn't say anything. She went to the kitchen instead, humming again. That sound seemed to dig under Ada's skin now, like a reminder she couldn't escape. Later that evening, Mema announced they would have guests for dinner, 2 women from church. She asked Ada to help prepare the meal. Ada obeyed, moving through the motions of washing rice, chopping onions, and stirring stew. All the while, the bottle in her drawer felt like it was calling her. When the guests arrived, the house was filled with laughter. They praised Mema's cooking, her kindness, her beauty. One of them even joked that Mema didn't look old enough to have a grown daughter. Ada smiled when they looked her way, but inside, her resentment was swelling, filling every quiet corner of her mind. As the evening ended and the guests left, Mema hugged Ada unexpectedly. "Thank you for helping tonight," she said softly. Ada froze for a second before hugging her back. It was warm, real, and it almost made her forget the bitterness. Almost. But when she went to bed, the thoughts returned stronger than before. The bottle wasn't just an idea anymore. It was starting to feel like the only way out of the shadow she had been living in all her life. The following day began with a heavy sky, clouds hanging low as if they were waiting for something to happen. Ada woke early, even before the usual sounds of Mema moving about the house. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, staring at the drawer that held the bottle. Her bare feet pressed into the cool cement floor, her hands resting still in her lap. She could hear Chica breathing softly in the next room, the faint rustle of her turning in her sleep. Mema's door was closed. For a moment, the whole house felt suspended in silence, and Ada liked it. She liked that stillness, the absence of her mother's voice filling the air. She got up and went to the kitchen. The kettle was empty. She filled it with water and set it on the stove, watching as tiny bubbles began to form at the bottom. Her mind wandered to the church service coming up on Sunday, and how the last time they went, Mema had been called up to pray again. Ada had been left standing in the pew, pretending not to notice the eyes on her. Everyone had smiled at her afterwards, but it had been the kind of smile people give because they feel they should, not because they want to. She leaned against the counter, tapping her fingers. The water reached a boil. Her hand twitched toward the drawer in the next room where the bottle was kept. The thought slipped in, she could do it this morning. No visitors, no rush. Just tea, and silence after. But before she could move, the sound of footsteps came from Mama's room. The door opened, and her mother's voice filled the kitchen. "Ah, you're up early, my Ada. You're making tea?" Ada nodded without turning around. "Yes." Mama came closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "That's good. I'll make the bread." They moved around each other in the kitchen, not speaking much, the only sounds the soft thud of bread being sliced and the clink of cups against the table. When Chica joined them, rubbing her eyes and yawning, Mama pulled her into a hug. Ada caught the way Chica's face lit up, how she melted into the embrace. That same ache rose in Ada's chest, but she pushed it down with a sip of her tea. After breakfast, Mama asked Ada to come with her to the tailor's shop. She needed to adjust a dress for an upcoming event. Ada didn't want to go, but Mama insisted, saying it would be good for them to get out together. The tailor's shop was small, the air thick with the smell of fabric and starch. Mama chatted easily with the tailor, complimenting his work and laughing when he teased her about always looking too young for her age. Ada stood off to the side, pretending to study a roll of fabric. Every so often, Mama would turn and smile at her, and Ada would smile back, but the warmth never reached her eyes. On the way home, they stopped at a fruit stall. The vendor gave Mama a generous discount without her asking. "For you, anything," he said, grinning. Mama laughed and thanked him, and Ada stood there wondering if the man would even recognize her face if she came alone. By the time they reached home, the clouds outside had darkened. Rain began to fall in slow, heavy drops, drumming against the roof. Mama went into the kitchen to start lunch. Ada followed, standing in the doorway as her mother sliced vegetables with that same practiced ease. She thought about the bottle again. How simple it would be to take it out, pour a drop, and watch everything change. But her hands stayed at her sides. She wasn't ready, not yet. Something in her wanted the moment to be perfect, to happen in a way that no one could undo or question. That evening, Mama gathered them in the living room to pray, as she often did when the rain came. Her voice was steady, her eyes closed, her words full of the same quiet strength that made people love her. Ada sat with her head bowed, but inside she was somewhere else, imagining a different kind of quiet, a quiet where she would finally be seen. When the prayer ended, Mama kissed her forehead again. Ada didn't move away this time, but the feeling in her chest was heavier than ever. The night stretched on, the sound of rain never stopping, and Ada lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her mind turning over one thought again and again. Soon. In the next days, the choice would no longer be something she only imagined. It would be something she did. And once it was done, there would be no going back. 2 days later, the city felt brighter than it had in weeks. The rain had stopped, and Lagos was noisy again. Car horns, street hawkers calling out prices, the clatter of people living their everyday lives. In their compound, children ran in circles, their laughter rising above the noise of the street. Ada sat by the window, half watching them. The sunlight streamed in, but she felt no warmth from it. Her mind had been sharpening over the past days, slowly cutting away any doubt she had left. The bottle was no longer just a hidden object in her drawer, it was becoming the center of every thought she had. Mama was in the backyard, talking to a neighbor about a women's meeting at church. Ada could hear her laugh, that familiar sound that made strangers smile. It was the same laugh Ada had grown up with, the same one that once made her feel safe. But now, it sounded like a reminder that she could never be the one people turned to first. She stood and went to the drawer. Her hand lingered on the wooden edge before pulling it open. The bottle lay there, its cloudy liquid catching the sunlight in a dull shimmer. She picked it up and held it for a long time. It felt cold despite the warm air in the room. In her mind, she could already see it. The teacup on the table, her mother's hand lifting it, the quiet moment after. That picture had played over and over in her head until it no longer shocked her. It felt rehearsed. The sound of the back door opening snapped her out of it. Mama stepped inside, carrying a small basket of vegetables. Ada, come and help me wash these, she said with a smile. Ada slipped the bottle into the pocket of her skirt and followed her into the kitchen. She set the vegetables in a bowl and filled it with water. Mama chatted about the meeting, about how the women were planning a small celebration for a church anniversary. Ada nodded at the right moments, but her mind was elsewhere. She noticed how Mama always reached for the biggest spoon, how she stirred stew in slow circles, how she tasted it before deciding if it needed more salt. These little details stuck with her, as if she were recording them for the last time. When lunch was ready, Mama called Chica from outside. The three of them sat at the table. Ada had thought about using the bottle then, but something in her hesitated. Chica's presence changed the rhythm, made the moment feel wrong. She needed it to be just the two of them. After the meal, Mama announced she would go to the market in the evening to buy ingredients for the weekend. Ada offered to go instead, but Mama shook her head. No, I want to see someone there. You can rest at home. That evening, the house was quiet again. Ada sat alone, the bottle in her hand. She could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional bark of a dog outside. She told herself this was it, tonight could be the night. When Mama returned, she looked tired but happy. She unpacked the groceries and began slicing peppers for a quick dinner. Ada stood in the doorway, watching her. The light above the kitchen table cast a soft halo around her hair. The sight made Ada's throat tighten. She reached into her pocket and curled her fingers around the bottle. The kitchen smelled of onions and fresh pepper, strong and sharp. Mama poured water into the kettle, humming under her breath. Ada stepped closer. Do you want me to make the tea tonight? Mama glanced at her, smiling faintly. That would be nice. The kettle began to whistle. Ada moved slowly, deliberately, placing 2 cups on the table. She tore open the tea bags, the paper crinkling softly in her hands. The bottle felt heavier now, almost as if it knew what was coming. She uncapped it. The smell was faint, barely noticeable. She tilted it, letting a single drop fall into one of the cups. Her hand didn't shake. The liquid disappeared instantly into the dark swirl of tea. She stirred both cups, careful to keep them looking identical. Mama sat down at the table, wiping her hands on a towel. Ada placed the cups in front of them, her heart pounding, though her face stayed calm. Mama picked up her cup, blowing gently before taking a sip. Ada watched, her eyes locked on her mother's face. Mama smiled after the first sip. Perfect, Ada. Just perfect. The words hit Ada strangely. For a moment, she felt something deep in her chest, an ache, almost like guilt, but softer. She tried to push it away. Mama kept talking, her voice warm, her eyes meeting Ada's with that same familiar love. But for the first time, Ada wasn't sure if she wanted to hear the rest. The cup was still in Mama's hands. The tea was still hot. There was still time to say something, to stop this. Ada sat very still, feeling the moment stretch between them, like a thread that could snap at any second. And for the first time, she wasn't sure which way she wanted it to break. Mama took another slow sip, her eyes never leaving Ada's. The steam curled upward from the cup, carrying the faint scent of tea leaves and sugar. Ada's fingers dug into her lap under the table, her nails pressing into her skin as if she needed something to anchor her in the moment. Every second felt stretched, thick, and slow, the air between them heavy enough to feel on her skin. The kettle was still on the counter, a thin hiss of leftover heat escaping from its spout. Outside, the street was alive with voices, children playing, a radio somewhere down the road singing an old high-life tune, the occasional rumble of a passing bus. Inside, it was just the two of them, the sound of their breathing, and the faint clink of Mama's cup against the saucer. Did I ever tell you about the first time I came to Lagos? Mama asked suddenly, her tone casual, as though they were just two friends sharing an evening. Ada shook her head. Mama smiled faintly, her eyes soft with the weight of memory. I had nothing. Not even enough money for a full meal. I slept on a mat in a small room behind a woman's shop. But I worked hard. I sold oranges in the hot sun until my skin burned. I told myself I wouldn't go back to the village unless I made something of myself here. And slowly, God blessed me. People helped me. Strangers became friends. And then, she paused, looking at Ada more intently. Then you came. And everything I did was for you. The words landed like stones in Ada's chest. She kept her eyes on the table, tracing the grain of the wood with her gaze. The bottle's weight seemed to press against her from inside her pocket even though it was no longer there. It was in the tea. It was already in motion. Mama reached across the table and touched Ada's hand. Her palm was warm, her grip gentle but sure. You've been different lately, she said quietly. Quieter. Is something wrong? Ada forced a small smile. I'm fine. You're my daughter, Mama said. I can see when something is not right. Ada's throat felt tight. She told herself to keep still, to wait, to let the tea do what it was meant to do. But something about the way her mother was looking at her made her feel like she was 13 again, sitting at this same table after scraping her knees in the yard, being comforted without a single word. The tea level in Mama's cup had dropped. Half gone now. Ada's eyes flicked to it and then away. Her pulse was loud in her ears. She thought of all the moments, Mama at the market, Mama being praised at church, Mama hugging Chica, Mama's laughter echoing down the hall, and then she thought of the silence she had imagined for so long, a silence where her own name would finally stand alone. Mama sipped again. You made this just right, she said softly, almost to herself. I don't remember the last time we sat like this. Just us. The words scraped at Ada's resolve. This was exactly what she had wanted, Mama's undivided attention, her presence focused entirely on her. And yet it was happening now, right before the point of no return. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. I'll get more sugar, she said quickly, heading to the counter. Her hands trembled as she opened the cupboard, though she tried to hide it. From behind her, Mama's voice came, light but curious. It's already sweet enough, Ada. Ada froze, her back still to her. For a second, she thought she heard a shift in Mama's tone, something knowing, something deeper, but when she turned, Mama was simply watching her with that same gentle gaze. She sat back down slowly. Mama lifted the cup again, and Ada realized she had seconds left before the last swallow. Do you remember when you were little, Mama began, you used to follow me everywhere? Even to the market, even when I told you to stay home. You always wanted to be right next to me. Ada remembered. She remembered clinging to her mother's wrapper, weaving through the crowded streets together. Back then, she had believed Mama was the safest place in the world. Mama laughed softly at the memory, then sipped the last of the tea. She set the empty cup down, the sound of porcelain against wood ringing faint in the air. Ada's stomach knotted. The cup sat there, harmless and deadly at the same time. Mama leaned back, letting out a quiet sigh. It's been a long day, she said. Ada waited. She didn't move, didn't breathe too deeply. Minutes passed, but nothing happened. Mama began gathering the cups, carrying them to the sink. Something cold slid into Ada's spine. Had she done it wrong? Had the drop been too little? Or, had Mama known? Mama turned from the sink, her face unreadable. Ada, she said, come here. Ada stood slowly, her feet feeling heavier with each step. She stopped just a breath away from her mother. Mama looked at her for a long time, then smiled. You've grown into such a strong young woman. I hope you know I'm proud of you. The words hit her harder than any accusation could have. And in that moment, Ada wasn't sure if she had just failed at her plan, or if something far more dangerous had just begun. That night, Ada lay on her bed wide awake, her body still but her mind a storm. Every word Mama had spoken kept replaying, twisting around the truth she didn't want to face. The tea should have worked. She had measured it in her head over and over, and the drop had been enough, or at least she thought it had. Yet Mama was fine. Laughing even. Washing the cups as though nothing had happened. The small bottle sat on her bedside table now. She hadn't returned it to the drawer. She wanted it close, almost daring it to remind her of the failure. Its cloudy liquid looked the same, but she could no longer look at it without wondering if Mema had somehow known from the start. Through the wall, she could hear Mema's soft breathing from her room, steady and calm. Chica's quieter breaths came from the other side of the house. Everything sounded normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. She sat up, swinging her legs to the floor. The cool cement made her toes curl. She picked up the bottle, turning it over in her hand. One thought came and refused to leave. If Mema knew, then she had been playing along. And if she had been playing along, then what did she want Ada to do next? The next morning, the house was filled with the scent of fried yam. Mema stood by the stove, humming again. She looked at Ada with a smile that was almost too warm. "Come, sit. Eat with us." Ada sat, but she barely touched the food. She watched Mema serve Chica, pouring her a glass of juice, laughing at something the girl said. Mema's eyes flicked toward Ada every now and then, as if checking for something only she understood. When breakfast was over, Mema announced they would visit an aunt in Sorulia. Ada wanted to refuse, but Mema insisted. "It will be good for us," she said, her hand resting lightly on Ada's shoulder. The ride there was filled with traffic and the smell of exhaust fumes. Mema chatted with the driver about the rising cost of fuel, her tone easy and familiar. Ada stared out the window, watching the crowded streets blur by. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mema was in control of more than just the conversation, that she was in control of the entire moment, of Ada's silence, even of her thoughts. At the aunt's house, the air was filled with the aroma of stew and the sharp sound of laughter. Mema slipped easily into conversation, her charm wrapping around the room like it always did. Ada stayed in the corner, barely speaking. She noticed how Mema's stories painted her as strong, loving, and endlessly generous. People nodded and smiled, reinforcing everything Ada had been feeling for months, that Mema's presence left no space for hers. The sun was beginning to set when they returned home. Mema made tea for herself, not asking Ada to help this time. She poured it slowly, her movements unhurried. Ada watched from the table, her fingers curling around the bottle hidden in her pocket. She had told herself she wouldn't try again so soon, but seeing Mema there, sipping calmly, made the decision feel inevitable. "Would you like some?" Mema asked, her eyes catching Ada's in a way that felt deliberate. Ada hesitated. "No." Mema took another sip. "You know," she began softly, "life is too short to hold on to shadows. Whatever it is you're carrying, you can put it down." The words were gentle, but they sliced clean through Ada's chest. She wanted to speak, to say something sharp or angry, but the sound wouldn't come. That night, Ada dreamed of a table with 2 cups, one empty, one full. She reached for the full one, but Mema's hand was already there, covering it. When she woke, her palms were damp with sweat. Days passed, and the tension in the house grew like an invisible fog. Mema went about her routines, but her glances toward Ada seemed heavier, loaded with meaning. Chica didn't notice anything. She laughed and played as usual, moving between them like a bright spark in the middle of a quiet storm. One evening, Mema called Ada into the kitchen. The table was set for 2. There was no sign of Chica. "She's spending the night at a friend's," Mema said simply. Ada's heartbeat quickened. Mema poured tea into 2 cups and pushed one toward her. "Drink with me," she said, her eyes never leaving Ada's. The steam rose between them, twisting and fading. Ada's hand hovered over the cup. She thought of the bottle in her pocket, thought of how easy it would be to end this moment one way or another. But Mema's gaze held her there, steady and knowing. "Ada," Mema said quietly, "whatever you think I've taken from you, it wasn't mine to keep. You've had it all along, you just couldn't see it." Ada swallowed hard. The tea sat untouched between them. The bottle in her pocket felt heavier than ever, but for the first time, she wasn't sure if it was a weapon or a burden. The night closed in around them, the air still and thick. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then silence. Ada didn't drink. Neither did Mema. They sat there, locked in the same quiet battle, each waiting for the other to make the next move. And in that stillness, Ada realized the story between them was far from over. It had only changed shape, becoming something she could no longer predict, and something she wasn't sure she could control. This story shows how tangled love and jealousy can become, and how the choices we make can change everything. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. Before you go, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We'd love to connect with you.